relevant, reliable, and researched. This is Experts on Call, the show focused on delivering leading-edge news and information on today's most beneficial products and services. This is Experts on Call on AM 650.
Welcome back to Key Pacific's Talk About Strata here on AM 650. I'm Sterling Fox. My co-host is Vancouver Province condo columnist and executive director of the Condominium Homeowners Association of British Columbia, Tony Juventu, and our guest in studio this show. Always delighted to have Adrian Murray, Strata lawyer from White Rock, with us on Talk About Strata. Adrian, I wanted to ask you about something that went down fairly recently, got a ton of coverage, not only here in Vancouver, but right across the country. It was Mayor Moonbeam and his colleagues at Vancouver City Hall entertaining a notion or a motion put forward by one of the team that would compel landlords in the city of Vancouver it would prohibit them from restricting pet owners from renting their properties. Now, I know this is a strata show where people own their homes, but a lot of them, or some of them at least, own strata so they can rent them out, produce an income generating situation. But I wanted to ask you about how legal that was and how that might affect strata owners. And this is the city of Vancouver that this ordinance might have gone forward in. It went down like the proverbial lead balloon. The public outcry was just really, really loud. But they actually wanted to prohibit landlords from banning pets of people who wanted to rent their premises. How does that apply in law?
Well, fortunately, we don't really have to deal with the reality because it didn't happen. But I think that there's, certainly the question, if I'm a landlord in a strata building and a strata building says no pets and a municipal bylaw says I can't refuse a tenant, you've got your conflict of laws.
Absolutely,
which,
yeah. This is what I was helping you would sort us out with.
The municipality may well think they can fine me if I do refuse such a tenancy. On the other hand, the Strata Corporation is going to fine me if I don't. So there's a rock and a hard place. Yeah. I think at the end of the day, we're going to see the bylaws and the provincial legislation trump the municipal regulation within a Strata Corporation.
Right.
But something that again, we haven't had to test it, but a misguided, I think, a concerning approach. I mean, I think certainly landlords and strata owners, particularly, that have the investments that they do in real estate and provide a significant number of rental properties to tenants. I'm not sure that there's much to be gained. It ultimately results in a disincentive for people to own real estate if they have no control over how it's going to be rented and who it's going to be rented to.
Right.
But at the end of the day, I think we still have the bylaws, and so whatever approach the City of Vancouver was taking, the ultimate guide for any owner in a strata lot and the tenants who reside in that strata lot are the Strata Corporation's bylaws.
Interesting. Tony, there was an attempt in this particular example by the City of Vancouver to create this local ordinance that failed. But municipalities will be undeterred by that attempt by Vancouver. The other municipalities will try to do the same sorts of things out of a somewhat distorted sense of fair play from where I'm sitting, but that's another show altogether. So ultimately, the Strata Corporation anywhere, the bylaws that exist within that building or within that complex pretty much trump anything that's going on in the city around it, correct?
Ooh, that's a little broad.
Okay.
That wouldn't apply in every circumstance. There would certainly be conditions. It's where the provincial legislation gives the Strata Corporation leave to have such a bylaw.
Okay.
So that bylaw is essentially created under the provincial legislation. It will take priority over the local bylaws.
Okay.
Okay. So that's because we may have some construction items that occur in buildings with respects to fire safety or something that's a local building code requirement that the Strata Corporation corporation's bylaws could not override.
Okay.
So where the provincial legislation specifically says you can have a bylaw about this, that bylaw will prevail over municipal legislation.
I wanted to ask you about this. I wanted to bring it up today, especially with Adrian here with us, Tony, because this received a ton of coverage, and it really did. It evoked quite a hue and cry, quite an emotional response as well from both sides of the issue, clearly. But at the end of the day, it was about 3-1 who were against the notion. I suspect a lot of that crowd were landlords going, excuse me, this is my property. I have a right to see who's going to lease my property and under what terms and conditions. Otherwise, I wouldn't have bought the property. That's why I bought it. It's my property. You need to take a step back here, folks. And ultimately, Adrian, that's what they had to do.
They did, and but in the meantime, it creates a tremendous amount of confusion.
Yes, it did.
Particularly among tenants.
Did. That's why I needed to raise it today with you.
Who think that the law has changed and that, in fact, now I am entitled to keep a pet if I'm a tenant in a building, notwithstanding what any bylaw may say.
Right.
So it's a confusion that we need to make sure is clarified, because the bylaws are the requirement.
Right. You mentioned one thing that I wanted to come back to, Adrian, the changing population of buildings. Tony pointed out, as we were talking about pet bylaws, that, in some buildings that once upon a time ago were deemed or by bylaw pet-free. Well, over time, the population of the building changes, and perhaps the mood of the population of the building changes. And, for example, as more residents of the building, Adrian, become older, some of those priorities change, and a lot of older people tend to, actually prefer having a pet around for companionship and other reasons.
Absolutely, and I think that stratas that aren't prepared to look at these bylaws make a huge mistake, because there's a need within their population that as the population is aging within the building, there's clear medical evidence that pets will benefit individuals. Maybe not any particular disability other than the certified guide dogs, but the just having the companion pet can be very, very beneficial.
Right.
The other thing I think that stratas want to think about is market value, and what a no pet bylaw may do, particularly if you are in older buildings where seniors 55 and over are moving in. Many of them are widows or widowers. Having a small dog or a cat is significant for them. They're not going to be interested in buying if you've got a no pet bylaw. So you've cut out a big chunk of your market. Now, I appreciate there may be a person that has a disability, but in terms of the proportion of the population, I would suggest that there's a much greater population looking to have an opportunity to have a pet.
So, Tony, a pet-friendly building would be more sellable on the open market.
Well, it depends on what people are looking at. But, we have a really great example out in the Tri-Cities area of a big townhouse complex across the road from a school, and it has an age restriction and a pet prohibition.
Really?
Yeah. And it's a family
complex.
So
no little kids, no animals, and you're right across the road from an elementary school.
And guess how much
time... Good planning, folks.
Yeah, and guess how difficult it is for people to be selling their units in this complex.
I'll just bet.
Yeah, they're having a really, really tough time. And it's because the bylaws themselves just simply don't reflect the community.
Right.
When you're looking at bylaws and formulating bylaws for your community, you really have to think broadly about what your community expectations are. You need to think about things like noise. Are we a wood frame building or are we concrete construction? Big noise differences from floor to floor.
Sure.
Are we a wood frame building that we've allowed everybody to put hardwood floors in? Well, that's going to have a huge impact difference with dogs than a wood frame building that everybody still has their original carpets, right? So
I can hear the nails on the floor.
I hear that all the time. Yeah. I can hear the nails of the dog on the floor.
That's
all
right.
Afternoon.
Sure.
Well, then maybe you should go for a walk in the afternoon. But those are the kind of things that are going to impact the decision making of the Strata Corporation. And the difficulty of it is it's likely that the dog whose nails are ticking on the floor is living above one of the Strata Council members who's now got this as a bone of contention that we have to change the bylaws.
Wow.
Not thinking about the whole building. Access. What kind of access do you have for your building? If you have a 100-unit building and each person's allowed to have a dog, can your property really handle a capacity of 100 dogs?
Right.
Because that's the possibility,
Well,
right?
sure, yeah.
Think about access, think about capacity. Is it the right building for dogs? Maybe it's only cats. Which are to be contained within the strata lot.
Right.
So capacity of pets also have an impact. There's just so many things that come up that people find that are a little bit of an irritation for them that really help to fuel a conflict. That when you're writing bylaws and creating bylaws, consult with your legal counsel on really the application of the bylaw, but then the enforcement of the bylaw.
Pets and their people, the subject of much contention and this program, or at least this edition of Key Pacific's Talk About Strata here on AM 650. Lots more still ahead. Stay with us.
There's still more ahead with Experts on Call, the show focused on delivering relevant and beneficial consumer information. This is Experts on Call on AM 650.